Hello, boys and girls. Should we finish our book today? I guess so. When last we left off, get these the hell out of here. When last we left off, the giant was putting mixed vegetables of carrots and green beans and even celery and potatoes into the bathtub. Prosciutto was confused by this. He couldn't understand it. He said, "Why are you putting mixed vegetables in my bath water?" "Ha ha 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 ha!" the giant replied with enormous laughter. "You fool! The mixed vegetables will make your skin look very good. They will rejuvenate you, and then you will be rejuvenated." "Ah, that seems to make sense," said Prosciutto. So then the giant scampered off into his pantry, with more of a surprise for Prosciutto. And then Prosciutto was sitting in the bathtub wondering, what am I doing here? Am I really going to get the job? Is there really a job to be gotten? Well, a few minutes later, here come back the giant. The giant come back with salt and pepper and garlic salt and garlic powder and oregano. And he was sprinkling all these things into Prosciutto's bathwater. At this point, Prosciutto began to become suspicious. He couldn't believe what was going on here. He just absolutely could not believe it. He looked at the giant and said, "What are you planning to do?" The giant told him to shut up. Stay in the bath. Prosciutto got really suspicious by this point. Prosciutto thought to himself, as the giant was sitting in a corner stroking his beard with drool on his chin, "Oh my God! This giant's going to eat me!" He jumped out of the tub and ran down the street. But what he forgot was, he was completely naked. He was completely naked. Completely naked. He heard screams and honks from other cars and vehicles as he was running down the street. He ran through the forest, all down through the forest until he got all the way home. And then when he got home, the little mouse came out of his mouse hole and said, "Prosciutto, you're naked. What the hell have you been doing?" Prosciutto said, "It's a long story." And he went to bed. The next day, Prosciutto woke up, still completely naked and confused by what happened. He decided to get dressed. He got dressed and headed down to the village. Once again, he was determined to get a job. So he went back to Greg. Greg, you remember Greg? The guy with a leg for an arm and an arm for a leg. He says to Greg while shaking his fist, "You better give me a job right now or I'll cut your wrist." Greg was furious too. He started shouting and prancing with glee. "I've got a job for you! Got a job for you! Wee 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 wee!" Prosciutto looked confused and stroked his chin. "What kind of job could you have for me around the bend?" And Gregory looked at him with a snarl and said, "First you must take off all your clothes and get into that tub over there." Well, Prosciutto had heard this story before. He was filled with fright. He couldn't believe what he was hearing with his ears. And then all of a sudden, coming through the door, who would appear? the giant that he saw the day before, with a sneer and a glare on his face. He looked at Prosciutto and said, "You're a disgrace." He chased them all around the job place and through and out the door. Prosciutto tripped over his own feet and fell on the floor. The giant was chasing after him, running with rage. Now it is time for me to turn the page. He chased him around and around and around again. He chased him around and around and around, and finally Prosciutto said, "I can't run no more. My feet are sore and I fell on the floor." The giant said, "Then get into that pot immediately." Prosciutto took off all his clothes. He got into the pot of boiling water. The giant started cutting up onions and carrots and weed, everything that was planted with a seed. Prosciutto couldn't believe what was going on around his eyes. He couldn't believe the boiling of his thighs. Greg looked at Prosciutto with silent glee. "This is what you get for asking me," he said, "for a job in which I have none of, a job in which you will look above, a job that there is no more." As Greg said as he fell to the floor, there was the giant standing over him with a giant club. He had hit Greg over the head with a thud. He put Gregory into the boiling pot with Prosciutto. And that, my friends, is the end of our story. Or is it? Out of the darkness, laughing with glee, came when that little mouse from out of a tree. He went to Prosciutto and said to him again, "I told you to get a job, my bald-headed friend." Prosciutto looked at him and was happy with excitement. The mouse was dancing and prancing with enlightenment. He picked up Prosciutto and carried him on his shoulders. He stormed out the door and went across the borders. He got him to his home and sat him in his chair. Said Prosciutto, "From now on, you have nothing to fear." The end. Well, everybody learned a lesson in this, kids. The lesson here is, don't trust anybody who wants to put you in a boiling pot of water. Even if it does look like bathtub water, it could mean that they are cannibals and they want to cook you in a stew. Especially if you have a name like Prosciutto. This is Mr. Jeremy saying so long and see you next time on Story Time!